to all of you. I won't be able to afford a new sustainable home. I'll just have to retrofit my existing one. It's about 40 years old. Assume it's a blank slate, that everything that's there is not ideal. What single thing do you recommend would have the most bang for buck for me to make my house more pleasant to live in and more energy efficient?
I think it depends what you have already. You might actually have some things you don't actually know about, but I guess you want to be doing the same things that we did in a new build, which is keeping the summer sun out. So whether that's by adding extra external blinds or internal curtains, looking at where all the airflow is going as well, whether you need to block any drafts or seal up any holes or vents to manage the weather. Whether you can put in deciduous trees, it's all those kinds of things. So if you can address the main principles, like we did in a new build, but see what you've got with improving maybe your insulation or your shading or your breezeways, maybe doing what we do, opening and closing curtains and windows to manage that as well. And then there's other things you might want to do out in your garden, providing habitat or frog ponds or your veggies, and composting, chickens, worms, whatever you can, to just live more sustainably. But you can look at other things too, like as I do, a lot of our furniture is vintage. We make a lot of our own cleaning products. We do a lot of share wastes and things with neighbours. So there's a lot you can do being sustainable. That's not just building a house, it's the lifestyle as well. And just not being wasteful in general. Like I think David Attenborough said, whatever you do, just don't waste. So reuse, like a lot of stuff in our garden is all saved from landfill. Whether it's the fire pit or the old rusty springs or a lot of the gardening material is all found or salvaged or handed down. So yeah, there's lots you can do. Yeah.
Again, you look at the most energy used in the home, strange it may seem, is your hot water. It's about 26 to 30%. So look at your hot water, and you go through it from that, heating and cooling, depending on your home.
I think heating's probably our biggest bill.
Yeah.
It's actually a very lovely house in the summer, but it's unpleasantly cold in the sometimes. So,
With really insulation and things too, yeah. Do you have air conditioning or reverse cycle?
We've got aircon, but it's ducted.
Yeah. So make sure you close all your ducts in winter if you're not using them. If you have fans, turn them the other way so that you're bringing down the hot air. Sealing your drafts.
I think the drafts are
having blankets in your living room, things like that as well. Just going back to basics.
Clothes you wear.
Yeah, clothes, exactly. I mean, in winter in our house, I wouldn't expect to walk around in, shorts in the middle of winter. You've got to think practically anyway, so I wouldn't put my heating on. I would just dress appropriately.
My wife's from Canada, from Winnipeg of all places, so she knows cold. But she's become the biggest winter whip I know. But she did ask when she got here, like, how come there's no coat hooks on the side of the door? And it's because you don't take them off.
I'm the same boat. I was really looking at renovation today.
Yep.
We've had one slide, I think, but it was just, for my first thing, I could see I could stop the drafts as a first thing.
Yeah. And stop the sun coming in too.
Yeah. But the house is all orientated the wrong way, for this.
I was going to say the best thing is probably to get an individual assessment of your house, because you might find you don't have good insulation on the top of the ceiling, and that is relatively cheap to put in and usually makes a very big difference both summer and winter. But
so there's bats in the roof, but I didn't realise that I should have the radiation
roof blanket
as well.
But that can be expensive to achieve unless you're prepared to take the roof off. It's easy to take the roof off, but it's not cheap. So that's once again the sort of trade-off between what's practical to do and relatively cheap, but going to give you a big bang for the buck. Yeah. And until you know what you're starting with, it's very hard to make.
So who does the assessing of people like
There are a few people around. I do it myself. There's a few other people that do that type of assessment. Yes.
There is books on retrofitting houses with adding sustainable features as well.
Your best bet, there's one of the resources on the information is about your home, there's a website, it's a Commonwealth Government website called Your Home, fantastic resource. Give you an enormous amount of information in there. You can do a self-assessment, and then once you've done a self-assessment, then if you're not happy with that, get someone else. One of the things about doing anything, it's really important to inform yourselves, because everybody will have different opinions, particularly about energy efficiency. Because energy efficiency and passive solar are two different things. They fold together in passive solar. But the retrofitting a home is a very large subject, but you have to assess it. But do a self-assessment first. It's like going to the gym. Do a self-assessment, then get an expert to assess you after your self-assessment.
So I have been looking for years and, following up things, but just coming to this talk, I was committed, I suppose, to glazed windows. That
No, look, there's the book. There's the book. Dada's got a copy of the book. So the book is here. Actually, also because we're selling it for Renew.
Yes. That's on
so,
special because
yeah.
the
But it's a-
edition's coming out.
It's updated in October.
Yeah, it's a huge term. Your best bet is, it's good doorstop. But also on the web, it's all there on the web. I sat on the technical advisory committee when it was updated last time. So it's a really good book. There was a question up the back.
No, it's not a question. I was just going to say something to the lady chat now.
Oh yeah, go
If
for
you
it.
do a home testing, then your local library
Oh,
generally
local
hires out a kit you can take home and check out the energy efficiency, work out the temperature, your house, and things like that. So you just go to the library. You should most of them do have them.
Tom's got an interesting house. It's a 4x2 in Hilton. It's not present. And you've got 5 kilowatts of PV. And there's quite often 8 people in the home because your partner brings her kids over.
Yeah.
And tell us the cost of running your house in summer. So it's all electric
Yeah.
because solar hot water system on the roof, and there's some boosting because it's solar electric.
The only gas I use is for cooking.
Yeah.
And whatever else is electric, So, and my electricity goes negative, so I have to rebate whatever electricity.
Because I think you said that your largest bill in summer was -$7.
Yeah. It was. And that's including the actual surcharge.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
which is pretty good.
Yeah.
So, I think your house was under 200,000 too.
Yeah, one night.
Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned about heating of water being a major user of energy. We built a new house, 2-storey, and what the biggest frustration for me is the time it takes for water
Yeah.
hot water to come out of the tap. 3 minutes in one location.
Yeah. One of the things is when you put thought into hot water, one of the biggest concerns with hot water is distribution. Because most hot water is used in the shower. 90% of hot water is used in the shower, but you only turn on once or twice a day. So what happens in the kitchen, you might use 1.5 litres of hot water, and you might turn on 40 times a day, depending on the family, etc. So therefore, the location of the hot water system is as critical as choosing the type of hot water system. If you have a heat pump, which is fantastic, as in Sonia's place, it's fantastic. But the house is designed around the hot water system. So not just around the block and everything else and the family's needs, but like on Tom's, he's got a solar electric because the bathrooms are at total different ends of the home, and the best distribution on his was from solar straight down to those points and the kitchen. So when you look at it, sometimes you can't change that. Obviously, when you're retrofitting, you can't do much about that. But that's a big user of energy.
I would add on the hot water front, we've got a heat pump hot water system, so it uses negligible amounts of electricity, really. But one thing I will say is that costs $3,000 installed, whereas a regular old resistive hot water system would have been about $1,000. When that heat pump hot water system claps out, and it will, it'll probably cost a hell of a lot more to repair than a resistive element one. So again, the sustainability of good product design comes into it as well. Hopefully you're not going to just abandon an
No.
otherwise expensive piece of equipment?
It is. Look, there's been a lot of change with solar water systems and heat pumps. You can get a good heat pump now for about $2,000, a good one. What happens is that a lot of that can be reused. It can be recycled, admittedly. But there's been huge gains. Gas system, the cheapest one that's reasonable, is about $1,300. The tanks are the things that go more than anything else. But most of the hot water systems should last you somewhere between about 12 to 15 years, realistically. And the tanks
Surprised it's that short, to be honest.
Keep on.
I'm surprised it's that short, to be honest.
Look, there could be more work. There were solar hot water systems made by a company here in Perth that no longer exists, who would last 25 years. But that company doesn't exist because there wasn't a market for their product. So anyhow, we better move on. So yes.
Peter and Sonia, did you find an empty block, or did you buy an old house that you knocked down to build?
Yeah, I found the block in Karrinyup first, and we did look at renovating it, but the existing house was completely the wrong way, so we actually flipped it 90 degrees. The existing house is still online actually, and it's a grim 70s throwback with outside every window there was a brick wall, no view, no aspect, and the whole house was full of skylights because it was just so dark and orientated incorrectly. And with the position of the house and the block, it wasn't going to be subdividable. But because of the size of our block, we realised, well, if we knock it down, pull the house all the way back to one side, we can actually subdivide it. So that makes the block more valuable to us and sustainable for the future. And we could pull it all the way back and end up with a big backyard instead of no backyard, and be able to subdivide in the future, as well as put a solar passive house on it. So for us, we had to make that decision.
Oh, yeah, it was that. There was an old house there from 1973. It was just a bit small.
It's hard finding houses in the area I live where you live, and finding empty blocks is difficult.
Yeah.
What sort of cost is it then to demolish a house? 10, 50?
If it's a lightweight home, stumped, about $10,000. If it's a brick home on limestone, typical 30s, 40s, etc., probably around about 14 to 15. If it is a slab on ground, 70s, it can be 15 to 24, depending. So that's the range. Starts at around about 8 to 10, goes up to about 24. Most homes are somewhere around about 15 to 18,000. And 80% of all the materials in homes is recycled now. Because all the bricks, all the concrete, all the limestone, it's all crushed up and used for road base. It's a bit different. You try and use companies that do recycle the material. There's very few of them left because it's too expensive because of the labour content to recycle. Vinsan up in Bayswater are really good at it because it's an Italian company. If you go out the back of the place, all these little old Italian blokes are pulling nails out of timber, but that's what it takes because it's too expensive. And what they do is they crush the timber up and it goes through a float tank and that gets pulverised and goes into compost. So it's quite different the way it used to be because it's so expensive to dump waste now into landfill, which is a really good thing, even though the builders think it's a bad thing.
Can you do it yourself?
Yes, but you'd be very careful.
And asbestos.
There's a lot of asbestos in the old buildings, in the eaves or in the walls, in various different parts, the sleep outs. You want to be very careful, and you need a demolition licence, and you can actually get a licence to remove asbestos depending how much you're going to do, but you have to do a short course. You can do that. But sometimes it might be best to have that money go to someone else because it's also quite dangerous.
They do use heavy equipment, obviously, and diggers and all the rest, plus they sift the
No, I
sand.
don't mean that. I
and
mean,
that.
like if you had an old house, like a brick house, right, and you wanted to reuse the bricks, are you allowed to do that?
You can, yeah, absolutely. And we've done it.
On the land, on your own land, you can.
You can, yeah, sure, absolutely, yeah. See, and you can get brick cleaning machines that you can feed them through, but only the old calcium lime bricks were the ones that comes off easy, not the modern ones. So you can do that. But also the Subiaco Sustainable Home that we did in the late 90s, 2000 I think it was open. We reused the building on site, which was an old Lime Industries building. It was brick, and the glass and the tiles were all crushed, put back together with fines, and we built the core rammed earth out of rammed rubble. And that's what the building was built out of, what was on site. But people weren't interested. Added about $8,000 to the house at the time. So yes, you can do it. Chris, you had something.
Roofing, tiles or tin?
Tim,
We've got tin.
Lets the hot air escape
Yep.
quicker out of your house of an evening.
I'm originally a Queenslander, so I know all about timber and tin.
No, tin, colour bond is a much better material. Tiles are like living in a crock pot. You know, bricks heat up, tiles heat up, and therefore you're just putting pressure inside of that vessel. Tiles also much heavier on the building. Also, they will come off where tin won't come off, and we're getting more and more storms, as we've seen last night. So therefore, and tin is only less than 0.24 of a millimetre thick. It's tiny. And it's high tensile, very, very strong. And when pressure is exerted on a tin roof, it pulls on the whole roof. And nowadays, the controls are a lot different. There's all tie-downs going right down the brickwork into the slab, not just the ones in the brickwork. It's very different. So that's changed over the last 8 years. So tin, and it dissipates heat like that. Tiles will retain the heat. So always a better thing. And we're doing a black tile roof in Netherlands at the moment. Why? Because I couldn't talk the clients out of it.
but insulation at that.
Yeah, so what happens though, see, in other words, there's a horror of horror. People say no eaves and black tile roofs. Well, I agree, although eaves I've shown you are not so helpful on the north. Helpful a little bit to the east and west, not much. South, pretty useless. But a black tile roof, we just have to super insulate under the tile. So therefore, it won't affect his performance. Now, I still would say don't do it, but if he, didn't do a good passive solar home, put the extra insulation, he'd be in a hot box. The air conditioner would never even work, even though he wants to put it in. I'm going, you won't need it. So, never be afraid to actually step outside the 9 dots, as long as you then compensate for what you're going to do. You can deal with those views to the west, to the east. You can deal with all sorts of things if you understand the principles. So, yes.
If you don't like polished concrete or tiles, can you use Laminex or vinyl? Is that?
Look, what happens is vinyl or timber or any of those products, they isolate the mass. The vinyl is a bit thinner, so some heat will go through it. You have to be careful because there's an enormous amount of heat on the slab right on the edge. Your surface temperature at the edge of the windows could be in the end of winter, could be maybe probably 35, 36 degrees. Your glass temperature on a typical day in winter of about 18 degrees, your surface temperature of the glass is around at 36 to 38 degrees. That's so it's way hotter because of the diffuse radiant heat and the direct heat hitting it together. So therefore, some products at the front there'll be a problem. So if you do, like we did a place with timber floors in Leederville. No, that one was in Wembley, and they wanted timber floors. So I changed the way the mass is used. So I don't get much direct gain from short wavelength. Most of it's long wavelength. So the depth and width of the room is different, just because of the flooring I'm putting in there. And how I use vertical mass and floor mass is different. One of the things, another place I did in Florida, and in a guest bedroom they wanted carpet which was facing north, and I said put 2 rows of tiles just that deep in the room. The heat goes in through those 2 rows of tiles, doesn't damage the carpet like it does the UV at the front, goes underneath the carpet all the way through winter. It's just fantastic in that bedroom. It's only got a window this wide. It's always warm. So therefore you can do various different things if you understand those principles. Any other questions from because I'll just take over. Yes.
I notice you've got quite a leaning towards built-in helmets and curtains. Is there a viable alternative? We've got pets who love curtains, and for that reason I don't. What's another option?
Yeah, so you can use blinds. In other words, you have to protect the windows. If you don't want any covering, you would have to go for high-end double glazing. You still have to shade the outside of it, because as I say, even high-end double glazing with low E glass, you'll still get heat into it. Radiant heat's a big problem in summer. So you can do that. Once you go to double glazing, you're limited to the choices you have of doors and windows. So therefore you don't have as many choices either. And you've got a lot more money, but you can do it. Again, you can go to the outside of a building. Like in summer, you look at the outside of the building to protect the building inwards. So shading, away from the house, trees, deciduous vines, sail shades, then right to the building itself. You can have louvers or coverings above the windows, at least 500mm either side. You can protect the buildings. You can actually get awnings that come down, the old type, and also there's ones that track inside the reveals, inside the windows now. There's a German set that's only, I think they're available now. Even places like Freedom Blinds have some which are here. You've got to be careful if they use those tracking systems. They don't pull out of the tracks. Some of them with the wind create pressure and they pop out of the tracks. Then you work your way in, then you get to the glass. You look at what type of glass, low E, low emissivity glass. You've got to look at the solar heat gain coefficient of the glass, depending which way it's facing, east, west or south or north, and make sure you deal with the glass. Then to the inside, that's when you get to the drapes or the blinds or whatever else. With blinds, obviously you can pull them down. If you've only got chihuahuas, then maybe you don't have to pull them down all the way. So there are choices, but drapes are your best thing if you can do them. So, and inherently, train the dogs.
Sorry. On that one, honeycomb blinds, I believe, are quite good, particularly the double, but I don't know how the dogs are going to go.
They'd tear them to pieces.
Yeah.
Keep them up out of reach.
Well,
Yeah.
you could keep them up out of
Yeah, the honeycomb blinds, there's different ones that you can either pull them up or pull them down. They're actually move up and down. The issue with all objects that go on a window, blinds, drapes, honeycomb blinds, Roman blinds, it's how much air escapes from around that object. And honeycomb blinds are really good. The best one, if you're going to use honeycomb blinds, are the ones that track in a U-shaped channel. And then you're stopping the air. They fix at the top and they fix at the bottom, and they track in a frame. Fix at the bottom doesn't really matter. What you're after is fixing at the top and the sides, so the air doesn't leak around. But look, there's a couple we did up in, where is it, over in Bayswater, 2-storey house, and they're really tight on their budget, like really tight. And so they're in the home with no drapes, exhibitionists. No drapes, nothing, for 12 months. And all the way through winter, even at night, they just wore T-shirts. So they said from the house they were in, the old weatherboard place, the house was transformational. So you don't have to use the drapes all the time. One we just did in City Beach, and the drapes pulled back inside the wall. So when they were pulled, out, they were exposed, but when they were back in the wall, the dog would have to crawl in there, but dogs do that. So there's lots of different ways. Yes?
With eaves on the north, you were saying that they don't need to be extended. Everything I've read, and you were saying that's an old-fashioned now.
Yeah.
With full height doors or windows, you should have around about 1 metre eve overhang. So
That's right.
not right.
There's an equation. So just to go through, so in a lot of stuff you'll still read, even stuff that's live on the web, they'll talk about the eaves and working out how far the eaves should be to stop the summer sun and allow the winter sun in. Just throw it out the door. I mean, basically, as I'm saying, Josh is a 10-star home. Have a look at it on the web. There's no, and when we put it up, and people went on the web for the first time, horror of horrors, some of the things coming back in saying, but there's no eaves, you can't do that. And I'm going, well, it's been assessed by the CSIRO, it's been assessed by Curtin University, 4 other universities around Australia. It's got everybody watching it. You can see the temperatures 24 hours a day for the last 7 years. Nowhere to hide. And it's working as a 10-star home. Not just is it a dodgy rating, no, you can't hide in it. So understanding the principles. See, what happens if you don't understand the principles, then you have to follow the prescription. You can't go back to context. To understand the physics of it is the most important thing. You're changing one window, changing a door, not having an airlock door, totally change the performance of a house. And then understanding how to use that home. Do you have to work hard and, what did I open, what did I close to? No. It's like having a leaky house, having a little bit of air go out. Big deal. Because if you've got the physics right, a little bit of air leakage is not going to make any difference to the performance of the home. And nowadays the basic Australian standards for leakage is such that it easily complies. But people will push to seal buildings. I don't think they're that healthy. Otherwise you've got to keep on transferring the air. And how do you live? If you go to all of that, then you think about social design. Social design is we live indoor, outdoor. Even today like this, you'd have a door or a window open. That's going to destroy those homes. We've got to seal them up. It just, you can't do that, you've got to keep it closed. I'm going, what, really? Why should it be dictated to by some design principle that's designed for northern cold Europe? Because, and buy a passive house, minimum for a single-storey house will cost you about 2,500 square metre. Homes I'm talking about are somewhere from 1,000 to 1,300. Most of the homes we've been talking about per square metre. And a passive house, minimum single-storey, 2.5. Two-storey, 3.5 to 4,000 square metre. So why would you spend that money and then have to seal yourself inside the building? Yes.
I noticed that a lot of the houses are thinking of the issue of the shade for summer. Some guys have shade sails, which obviously you take them down and put them up. But I thought I saw some louvers in the presentation there. So how do you handle those in the winter time to get the sun coming in to heat your slab?
Go back to one of the photos. Yeah, you can see when you see the shadow see the sun coming in, there's lines. So it obviously blocks some of the sun.
Yours are automated.
Yeah, so you just look at the ground. And
so you do manually?
Yeah, you just look at the strip and try and minimise the...
That's right, the mouse.
So you have to sort of be... I'm a techie, so
I'd
want the movers.
You've got weeks. You won't see it coming in.
Yeah, it doesn't change dramatically every day.
So you sort of set them for the day.
So they'd be right for a couple of weeks or so. You said, I might just turn it a bit more and it comes in a bit more. It's not a panic thing.
So they're remote on your phone or something.
No, we don't even. I mean, in the morning, like if it rains, it closes by itself.
Okay.
And then when it happens to open it in the morning, you just look at the lines on the ground. Yeah, very mathematical.